Close your eyes softly. Let us go back, far before the marble columns, far before emperors, before Caesar, before even the roads of Rome. This is the beginning. Long ago, on the banks of a slow-moving river called the Tiber, two tiny twins floated in silence, abandoned, yet chosen. Their names, Romulus and Remus, children of the god Mars and a mortal priestess. Their birth was a threat to a cruel king who ordered them drowned, but the river didn't obey. It cradled them, rocked them gently, and delivered them to the roots of Rome itself. And then, something wild happened. From the shadows of the forest, a she-wolf appeared. She looked down at the helpless boys, and instead of walking away, she did the unthinkable. She fed them, protected them, raised them. For a time, nature, not man, kept Rome alive. Later, a humble shepherd and his wife would find the twins and raise them as their own. The boys grew strong. They laughed, fought, dreamed. And one day, they wanted to build a city. But dreams have shadows. As they stood together, trying to mark the boundaries of their future home, a terrible argument broke out. Words turned sharp. Then came the silence. After Romulus raised his hand and killed his brother, Remus fell. And Rome rose. Romulus built walls, not just of stone, but of story. The story of power, struggle, and sacrifice. He welcomed outcasts, exiles, wanderers. He gave them a home. But there were no women. So Romulus invited a neighboring tribe, the Sabines, to a feast and stole their daughters. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival, the Roman kind. From there, kings ruled the growing city. 7 in total. Some wise, some brutal. One created Rome's first laws. Another built her first temples. Another dug the sewers that would outlast empires. But in time, the final king, Tarquin the Proud, let power poison his soul. His son committed an unforgivable crime against a noblewoman. The city wept, then rose. No more kings. The people said that. And just like that, a monarchy fell, and a republic was born. Rome was no longer ruled by a crown, but by citizens, by law, and by the fire of freedom. And now, as you breathe deeply, let that fire flicker in your dreams, because this is only the beginning, only the beginning. The king was the throne, empty, but power, real power, cannot simply vanish. It needs a new form, a new shape. Rome found hers in the Republic. 2 consuls were chosen each year, their powers limited and watched. Behind them stood the Senate, not kings, but elders, voices of experience and caution. The laws were no longer whispered behind palace walls. They were etched in bronze tablets, placed in the forum for every Roman to see. But peace was never Rome's nature. While her borders stayed quiet for a time, her soul wrestled with itself. You see, Rome was divided, not by enemies, but by class. At the top, the patricians, noble families, who held the keys to power. At the bottom, the plebeians, workers, soldiers, farmers, the many. The plebeians bled for Rome, died in her wars, built her walls, but they had no voice. And one day, they walked away. Literally, they marched out of the city, up a hill, and refused to return until they were heard. This was history's first general strike, and it worked. The patricians agreed to create the role of tribune, defenders of the people, untouchable and powerful. From then on, Rome belonged to all who served her, not just the rich, but struggle didn't end. The plebeians wanted more: laws, land, dignity. Their voices rose again and again. Slowly, things changed. Rome was evolving. She now had citizens who could vote, laws that applied to all, courts that could be challenged. System, imperfect but alive. But outside her walls, enemies were watching. The Latin League, the Etruscans, Attila, mountain, tribes. And so, Rome went to war, not for glory, but for survival. She fought city by city, valley by valley, sometimes winning, sometimes retreating, but never stopping. And when a people were conquered, Rome did something brilliant. She offered them a place in her world, not as slaves, but as allies, sometimes even citizens. This was how Rome grew, not only by sword, but by strategy. By the time 100 years had passed, Rome had transformed from a village on the Tiber into the most powerful force in central Italy, and yet, deep inside, the old struggles still stirred. The poor still struggled to eat. The rich still hoarded land. And Rome, like a restless flame, continued to burn, hungry for more. But for now, let your mind rest. Hear the quiet after the storm. Feel the breath of the Republic, still young and uncertain, but filled with possibility. The kings were gone, but the battles had only just begun. Rome had of Italy, but her hunger reached beyond her shores. To the south lay Sicily, a rich island caught between two giants, Rome and a mighty city across the sea, Carthage. Carthage was ancient, wealthy, and powerful. Its navy ruled the western Mediterranean. Its ships could close any port. Its merchants sold goods from Africa, Spain, and beyond. And it would become Rome's greatest enemy. It began with a single call for help. Mercenaries on Sicily asked Rome to intervene. Rome agreed. Carthage saw it as a betrayal, and so began the First Punic War. Rome had no navy, but she built one fast. She copied a Carthaginian ship, nailed wooden bridges to the decks, and turned sea battles into land battles where Roman soldiers thrived. It was long, it was brutal, but in the end, Rome won. Sicily became her first overseas province, but Carthage was not finished. Years later, in the Second Punic War, a name would echo across every Roman street: Hannibal. He was brilliant, bold, merciless, and he did what no one imagined. He marched from Spain across the Alps with an army and elephants. He came into Italy like thunderdot. At the Tribia, at Lake Trasimene, at Cannae, he destroyed Roman legions. At Cannae alone, 50,000 Romans died in a single day. No enemy had done this before, but Rome did not surrender. She adapted. She avoided direct battle. A general named Fabius Maximus used patience as his weapon. Cinos, another Scipio, Africanus, went to Spain, then to Africa. When Hannibal returned to defend Carthage, it was too late. At the Battle of Zama, Scipio defeated him. Carthage surrendered again, but Rome was not content with a wounded rival. Years later, in the Third Punic War, Rome attacked Carthage once more. They burned the city to the ground, brick by brick. And Carthage was no more now. Rome was supreme in the West. She had provinces in Spain, North Africa, and Sicily. She turned her gaze east, toward Greece, Macedonia, and the lands once ruled by Alexander the Great, and one by one she took them. By the end of it all, Rome did not just control Italy, she commanded the entire Mediterranean. But something was changing. Wealth flooded into the city. Slaves arrived by the thousands. Small farmers lost land. Rich men grew richer. And in the streets of Rome, the gap between rich and poor grew like a wound. The Republic was still alive, but it was bleeding. And yet, as you rest your thoughts, remember, Rome had survived kings, survived Hannibal. She now ruled the known world, but her greatest enemy was still within. Rome had, but it could not conquer itself. The wealth of victory had poisoned her soul. The poor grew poorer. The rich ruled the Senate like kings. Rome was a republic in name, but cracks ran deep, and into those cracks stepped a man. His name was Tiberius Gracchus, a tribune, a reformer. He tried to give land back to the poor, tried to remind Rome of her duty to all citizens, not just the elite. They murdered him. 10 years later, his brother, Gaius Gracchus, tried again. He, too, was killed. These were not isolated events. They were warnings. The rules were breaking. Soon, generals, not senators, held real power. They had armies loyal to them, not to the Republic. One of them was Marius, another was Sulla. When they clashed, blood flowed through Rome's streets. And then came Julius Caesar. Charming, brilliant, ruthless. He conquered Gaul, modern-day France, in a brutal and brilliant campaign. He became rich, loved, feared, but when the Senate ordered him to return without his army, he stood at the edge of a small river, the Rubicon, and he crossed it with that single step. Civil war began. Caesar chased his rival Pompey across the Mediterranean. He won. He returned to Rome, not as a general, but as a dictator for life. He reformed the calendar, forgave enemies, passed laws for the poor, but he wore power too openly, or the crown too close. On the Ides of March, senators stabbed him 10 times. Among them was Brutus, once like a son to him. The killers thought they had saved the Republic. They were wrong. Another war followed. This time, Caesar's adopted heir Octavian rose, alongside Mark Antony. Together, they crushed Caesar's killers. Then, they turned on each other. Antony allied with Cleopatra in Egypt. Octavian used it to turn Rome against him. The final battle came at Actium Sea against sea. Octavian won. Antony and Cleopatra took their own lives. And Octavian, now called Augustus, stood alone. He was clever. He kept the Senate, kept the Republic's form. The truth was clear. Rome was now an empire, and Augustus was its first emperor. He did not wear a crown, but he held absolute power, and under him, peace returned. The gates of the Temple of Janus, open in war, were closed. The Pax Romana had begun, and as you rest, let this part settle like ancient dust. The Republic had died, not with a bang, but with cheers. Rome had chosen a new path, and Augustus, a leader into a golden age, Rome had no longer a struggling republic, but a confident empire, and at its heart stood Augustus. He ruled not with fear, but with wisdom. He reduced the army size, built roads that crossed mountains, and created a postal service that could carry a letter across the continent. In his quiet way, he reshaped the world. He said, "I found Rome a city of bricks, and left her a city of marble." And for nearly 200 years, Rome would enjoy something rare in human history, Pax Romana, the Roman peace. After Augustus came Tiberius, his stepson, strong general, but cold and distant. He ruled quietly, then vanished to the island of Capri. Rome whispered about what he left behind. Then came Caligula, young, brilliant, but soon twisted by power. He called himself a god, planned to make his horse a senator. His madness became too much. The guards ended his reign with a blade. Next was Claudius, ignored for years because of a limp and stutter, but he proved wise. He conquered Britain, welcomed outsiders, and brought new lands into the empire. And then came Nero, who began with promise and ended in fire. When Rome burned, he played music. He murdered his mother, his wife, and countless others. In the end, abandoned and hunted, he took his own life, but Rome survived. A new dynasty rose, the Flavians, and with them came one of the world's most famous wonders, the Colosseum, a gift to the people under the next emperors Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus, Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. The empire reached its greatest size. Trajan expanded Rome to its peak, from the Atlantic to the Persian Gulf. Hadrian drew borders, building Hadrian's Wall in Britain to mark the edge of the known world. Antoninus Pius ruled in peace. And Marcus Aurelius, a philosopher, king, wrote thoughts that still guide us today. It was a time of art, literature, aqueducts, medicine, and law. A time when Roman roads connected over 70 million people. But golden ages do not last forever. When Marcus Aurelius died, he left the empire to his son, Augusta, and with him the shadows returned. But for now, in this moment, rest your mind. In the glow of peace, let the whispers of poets, the hum of fountains, and the laughter of Roman children lull you to sleep. This was Rome at her height. A world of marble, law, and light. The sun high over Rome, but now shadows lengthened. After the death of Marcus Aurelius, his son Commodus ruled with vanity and delusion. He saw himself as a god, a gladiator. Rome, under his rule, became a stage, and the empire a game. He was assassinated. But the damage had begun. Rome fell into chaos. In 1 year alone, 4 emperors rose and fell. Armies chose emperors. Loyalty was bought or broken. And yet, in the darkness, few sparks still burned. One was Septimius Severus, a North African general who brought stability. Another was Aurelian, who reunited a crumbling empire and built mighty walls around Rome. But the cracks were widening. Invasions from the north, plagues that wiped out millions, economic collapse, corruption, confusion. In the 3rd century, the empire split under the pressure. And yet again, a reformer rose, Diocletus. He changed everything, divided the empire into east and west, created a new system of shared rule, the tetrarchy, and tried to freeze prices and control jobs. But his greatest test was religion. Christianity, once a whisper, had grown. Diocletian tried to crush it. He failed. Then came Constantine, a general who saw a vision of a cross in the sky before battle. He converted, and the empire changed forever. He founded a new capital in the east, Constantinople. And from there, Rome would survive not as one empire, but as two. The west weakened. The east endured. And then, the worst happened. From the east, a terrible force emerged. The Huns, led by Attila. Behind them, waves of frightened tribes, Goths, Vandals, Franks, pushed into Roman lands. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Rome was sacked by the Visigoths, the Eternal City, plundered. More invasions followed. Vandals captured North Africa. Gaul fell to the Franks. Spain fractured. Britain was abandoned. In Italy, the empire was reduced to ceremony. And in 476 AD, warlord named Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor in the West. A boy named Romulus, Augustus, Tulus. No parade. No last battle, just a quiet end. The West was gone, but the East, the Byzantine Empire, would live on for nearly 1,000 more years, preserving Roman law, art, and memory. And even when Constantinople fell in 1453, Rome's story wasn't lost. It lived in churches, in law books, in languages. In us, Rome never truly fell. It transformed. It transformed. The Roman gods ruled the empire, proud, thunderous, unforgiving. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, statues towered in temples, sacrifices burned. Priests prayed to maintain the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. But quietly, underground, a new faith was being whispered. A carpenter's son from Nazareth had walked the earth, preaching peace, forgiveness, the kingdom of heaven. His name was Jesus, and while Roman authorities crucified him as a criminal, his story didn't end there. It began. His followers spread across the empire, from Judea to Greece to Rome itself. They gathered in hidden rooms, broke bread, and refused to worship emperors. They were called Christians. And Rome didn't understand them, so the empire struck back. Some were arrested, others fed to lions. They sang hymns even as flames rose around them. Still, The faith grew because Christianity didn't just promise gods, it promised love. It promised a savior who had suffered too. And then came a man who changed everything, Constantine. He was a soldier, a general, a future emperor. In the year 312 CE, as he marched toward battle at the Milvian Bridge, he saw something strange in the sky, a glowing cross, and in a dream that night, he heard words, "In this sign, conquer." The next day, his soldiers painted crosses on their shields. They won, and Constantine, once a pagan, became the first Roman emperor to embrace Christianity. He passed the Edict of Milan, granting religious freedom across the empire. Churches were built, Bibles were copied, bishops gathered in councils to define the new faith's beliefs, and in the East, founded a new city, Constantinople, a Christian capital for a Christian empire. The world had changed from a persecuted sect in shadows to the soul of an empire. Christianity had risen, not by sword, but by spirit. But not all embraced this new faith. Some clung to the old gods. Some feared what change would bring. And some emperors after Constantine would try to undo it. But the current was too strong. The cross had replaced the eagle. The shepherd had replaced the soldier. In Rome, once the empire of iron and marble, now held a beating heart of faith. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine soft candlelight flickering in catacombs, hymns echoing through hidden chambers, and a faith growing not by force, but by quiet, stubborn hope. The gods of Olympus were silent now. But another voice had risen, one that promised peace beyond this world. The Western Rome faded, but the East endured, and from its heart a city rose, not built by legend, but by vision. Constantinople, founded by Constantine himself, stood between two worlds, Europe and Asia, old and new, pagan and Christian. Its golden domes shimmered above the Bosporus Strait. Its walls stretched tall, strong enough to survive centuries of siege. Its markets held spices from India, silk from China, and silver from distant mountains. This was no shadow of Rome. This was Rome reborn in the East. The people didn't call themselves Byzantines. They called themselves Romans. Their empire, the Roman Empire. Later, would we name it Byzantium? Here, emperors still ruled in marble. Palaces' senators still debated. But now, the cross stood where Jupiter once had. Greek had replaced Latin, and Orthodox Christianity shaped every law, every dream, every hymn. The empire's strength lay in its structure. Where the West had crumbled, the East built bureaucracy, layers of scribes, ministers, generals. Where Rome once ruled by sword, Byzantium ruled by paperwork, diplomacy, and holy rituals, and the empire thrived. Emperors like Theodosius II built the mighty Theodosian walls, said to be unbreakable. Anastasius filled the treasury with gold, and the church and state walked hand in hand, painting a vision of divine order on earth. Yet, it wasn't always peace. Religious arguments turned into riots. Iconoclasts smashed sacred paintings. Plagues swept through the streets. An enemy circled Persians, Slavs, Arabs, and more. But Constantinople held, again and again, because the East had something the West had lost. Time to adapt, time to reform, time to dream again. As you close your eyes, hear the soft call of bells from distant churches. Feel the breeze off the sea that once carried Roman legions. And picture a city where ancient laws met heavenly hope. This was Byzantium, neither old nor new, but eternal in its own way. Rome had fallen in the West, but in the East, still lived, still whispered, still believed. The Byzantine wrong, but one man dreamed of something greater. Justinian I, son of Balkan peasants, became emperor of Rome's eastern half. But in his heart, he wanted to reunite the whole thing, East and West, Rome and Constantinople. Past and future, by his side was someone the empire had never seen before, and never would again. Theodora, once a stage performer, now empress, clever, fierce, compassionate, a woman born to shadows, who rose to rule beside an emperor. Together, they built an empire of vision. But first, they faced fire in 532 AD. A riot exploded in Constantinople. The Nika riots. Half the city burned. Rebels crowned a new emperor. Justinian wanted to flee. Theodora looked him in the eye and whispered, "Purple is a noble shroud. If they must die, they'd die as royalty." So Justinian stayed. His general Belisarius crushed. The revolt, the empire in their dream, survived. Then came rebuilding. In the heart of Constantinople, they raised one of the world's greatest churches, Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom. Its golden dome seemed to float on air. A light poured in like heaven itself had opened. Justinian stood inside and said, "Solomon, I have outdone you." But dreams don't stop at marble. He turned his eyes west to reclaim what had been lost. Belisarius sailed with armies to North Africa, where the Vandals ruled. Rome's banners returned then to Italy, broken and lost. He marched into Ravenna, defeated the Goths, and took back the city of emperors. But victory came with a price. Years of war, ruined cities, a plague that spread from Egypt to the empire, killing millions, maybe even half of Constantinople. Justinian grew old and alone, but before he died, he left one last gift. He gathered every Roman law from kings to emperors and ordered it to be rewritten, organized, and preserved. The result, Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. It would become the foundation for legal systems across the world, even today. When Justinian finally closed his eyes, he left behind a wounded but brilliant empire, and a vision of Rome rekindled, a Rome of faith, law, and light. As you drift into rest, hear the soft echo of bells inside Hagia Sophia, and let Justinian's dream linger in the silence, that Rome, even broken, could be made whole again, After Justinian stood proud, but thinner, slower, older. Century by century, Byzantium faced 1,000 cuts. First came the Persians, then the sudden, unstoppable rise of a new force. Islamic armies united under the banner of the Prophet Muhammad. They swept through the empire's richest provinces, Syria, Egypt, and North Africa, lands that had been Roman for centuries. But Constantinople still stood. The city survived invasions again and again, sometimes thanks to its walls, other times thanks to a strange, secret weapon, Greek fire, a liquid flame that even burned on water. Still, the empire shrank. And then, new allies arrived from the west, the Crusaders. At first, they marched through Byzantine lands with holy purpose. They fought Muslims in the Holy Land, and the empire welcomed their strength. But over time, friendships frayed. In 1204, something unthinkable happened. The Fourth Crusade, instead of fighting Islam, the Crusaders turned on Constantinople itself. They looted the churches, shattered icons, stole gold and relics, burned the Queen of Cities from within. The empire was shattered, split into fragments, exiles, and puppet states. And yet, somehow, it came back. A man named Michael VIII reclaimed the capital decades later, but it was never the same. Byzantium was now a shadow, rich in memory, poor in power. And then came the Turks. From the east, the Ottoman Empire grew like a storm. It captured towns, cities, entire provinces. Byzantium pleaded for help, but the West, now divided between Catholic and Orthodox churches, offered little. Still, emperors stood tall, few, proud, and unyielding. Some led soldiers into battle. Some begged for peace. Some simply prayed. But the walls of Constantinople, though mighty, could not hold forever. As you rest now, imagine a candle burning in a stone tower. Its light flickers, weak but unbroken. That was the Byzantine Empire in its final years. Not yet fallen, but surrounded, waiting, holding the line between history and oblivion. The year was for Constantinople, once the heart of Rome. The crown of Byzantium now stood alone, surrounded by enemies, abandoned by allies, but unbroken in spirit. The city's last emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, ruled a hallowed empire. A few islands, a few castles, but still, the soul of Rome lived in its stones, its bells, its people. And beyond the city walls stood Mehmed II, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Young, brilliant, determined, he brought with him a massive army, siege towers, cannons, including one so large it could shatter stone, and a fleet ready to strike from sea. For 53 days, Constantinople resisted. Its walls, built 1,000 years earlier, still held strong. But each night, the defenders prayed, and waited. Inside the city, priests held vigils in Hagia Sophia, that great cathedral where emperors were crowned. And Constantine, not a king of riches, but of faith, led from the front. On May 29th, as dawn broke, the final assault began. The cannon roared, the gates shattered. The Ottomans surged. Emperor Constantine threw off his royal cloak. He drew his sword, vanished into the battle. He was never seen again. By nightfall, Constantinople had fallen, and with it, the last flickering flame of the Roman Empire. But was this truly the end? No, because legacies do not die with walls or crowns. The Orthodox Church lived on. Monks fled west, carrying books, wisdom, and memory. The fall of Constantinople helped spark the Renaissance, a rebirth of Roman knowledge in Europe. And far away, in Russia, the Tsars began calling themselves Caesars. They declared Moscow the Third Rome, the echoes of Rome, of its law, its language, its roads, its ideas, never truly faded. They lived in every courtroom that honors justice, every cathedral that seeks heaven, every city built with order and reason. Rome endured, because Rome was more than an empire. It was a vision of civilization itself. And tonight, as you drift into peaceful sleep, know this: the story didn't end. It transformed in the silence after swords, in the ruins of marble, in the dreams of poets and scholars. Rome lives on. In you, in me, in all of us, in all of us. The great stories focus on emperors and generals, but behind the marble and glory lived people, mothers, farmers, bakers, poets, real Romans, living real lives. And tonight, you walk with them, mourning in Rome as the sun rose over the rooftops of the city. Life stirred slowly. A wealthy family might wake in a domus, a private house with mosaic floors, open courtyards, and walls painted with red and gold. Slaves would light fires, prepare honey bread, and bring water for washing. Meanwhile, the insulae, the apartment buildings where most Romans lived, the poor would rise early. The rooms were small, the staircases steep. But outside, the city awaited. The Roman mourning men wrapped themselves in togas. Women tied their hair and pinned their stola dresses. Children ran to the local grammaticus, a teacher who used wax tablets and scrolls to teach Latin and Greek. In the streets, barbers opened shop. Bakers hauled warm loaves from clay ovens. Vendors shouted the day's deals: olives, figs, wine, cheese, and everywhere water flowed. Rome was a city of fountains, powered by aqueducts that stretched for miles. Public baths would open later, but even early, citizens gathered at street spouts to wash and gossip. Meals and work Romans, usually, ate 2 or 3 meals a day. Breakfast was simple: bread dipped in wine or honey and dates. Lunch might be cheese, eggs, and vegetables, or meat if you could afford it. Dinner, called cena, was the heart of family time. The rich dined in reclining rooms, served multiple courses on silver plates. The poor sat on stools, but laughter still filled the room. Most Romans worked hard. Artisans hammered iron, wove wool, or shaped clay. Farmers tended olive trees in wheat fields. Scribes copied contracts. Midwives delivered babies, and builders raised cities. Even children helped gathering firewood or running errands. Baths, stories, and the night-ass afternoon turned to dusk. Citizens flocked to the thermae public baths. There they bathed, exercised, discussed politics, and listened to poets. In the evenings, oil lamps glowed softly. Storytellers entertained children with tales of heroes. Lovers strolled under colonnades. Old men played dice games beside fountains, and when stars covered the Roman sky, the city finally quieted. Behind every stone, every column, lived the heartbeat of daily life. A life filled not just with history, but with family, rhythm, and warmth. Sleep now in ancient Rome. As you close your eyes, imagine the smell of baked bread in narrow streets, the splash of fountain water, echoing through stone alleys, the calm voice of a mother singing a lullaby in Latin because, while emperors ruled the empire, it was these people, the everyday Romans, who gave it soul, Rome didn't with words, it conquered with discipline, and that discipline came from the greatest army the ancient world had ever seen. The Roman legions, becoming a legionariate, started with a vow sacramentum. Roman soldiers swore loyalty not to a flag, but to the emperor and to Rome itself. He trained in full gear, marched 20 miles a day, and practiced until muscle became memory. Every man wore a larica segmentata armor of curved metal strips, gladius, short stabbing sword, a scutum curved rectangular shield, and on his belt, a symbol of Roman confidence, tools, dice, sometimes poetry. Inside a Roman camp, the army didn't just fight, it built every night. Soldiers constructed a full military camp: trenches, wooden walls, guard towers, streets laid out in perfect order. A shrine in the center for the emperor's spirit camps weren't just places to rest. They were proof Rome brought order wherever it went. The power of formation: Roman soldiers didn't charge blindly. They moved like one body. The testudo, or tortoise, formation placed shields on all sides, creating a living tank. The triple line system allowed for depth and rotation, and when the centurion's whistle blew, legions shifted like clockwork. They weren't the biggest, but they were the most organized, obedient, and calculated. Rome's global footprint: legions stood guard across the known world, from Britain to Egypt, Spain to Syria. They built roads, forts, and even cities. When they weren't fighting, they farmed, policed, and married local women, spreading Roman culture as they settled. After 25 years, a legionary earned Roman citizenship, a plot of land, a pension that let him live out his days in peace. Discipline above all desertion, execution, cowardice, shaming, flogging, or worse, decimation, where 1 in every 10 men was killed by his comrades. Harsh, yes, but it worked, because Rome's enemies didn't fear their size. They feared their unity. Rest now, soldier of Romance, you drift to sleep. Listen for the clink of iron armor under moonlight, the hum of men praying before battle. Quiet pride of the centurion, who stands watch long after all have slept. The Roman army wasn't just a machine of war. It was a philosophy. Order conquers chaos, conquers chaos. Rome was led by senators, praised by generals, but behind the thrones in marble halls stood women who shaped the empire in quieter ways. They weren't often crowned, but they raised the crowned, teased the crowned, protected the spirit of Rome in every home. Mothers of Rome in the Roman world. Motherhood was sacred. Women raised warriors, scholars, poets, the future of the Republic. Cornelia, mother of the famous Gracchus brothers, once held out her sons and said, "These are my jewels." Her wisdom molded reformers. In every doma's home, women ran the household, managing slaves, arranging feasts, weaving cloth, preserving family honor. They weren't silent. They were central empresses and influencers. Some women stepped beyond the home into the spotlight of history. Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus, was called Rome's first empress. Calm, clever, always composed, she shaped politics with whispers, not war. Agrippina the Younger, mother of Nero, was fierce and unrelenting. She wrote laws, chose allies, and even briefly ruled behind her son. Theodora, wife of Justinian, once an actress, now an empress, became a voice for women's rights, sheltering the abused and confronting senators without fear. Poets, priests, and philosophers. Roman women weren't just caregivers or empresses. Some were poets, like Sulpicia, writing of love and longing, priestesses, like the Vestal virgins, guarding sacred flames in Rome's destiny. Philosophers, like Hypatia in Alexandria, who taught math and astronomy while the world changed around hers. They walked libraries. They healed soldiers. They debated in gardens. Slaves and survivors. Not all Roman women lived in villas. Some were born slaves, sold, beaten, forgotten, and yet many survived with grace. Some were freed. Some became business owners. Some passed down stories that emperors could never erase. Fall asleep beside Rome's quiet strength as the world around them shifted. Women remained its quiet rhythm. You may not see them in marble statues, but listen closely, okay? And you'll hear them in lullabies whispered under olive trees and letters written by candlelight. And the courage passed from mother to child. The women of Rome didn't need armies. They shaped history with love, loyalty, and fierce wisdom. Rome conquered. Rome ruled with law, but Rome inspired with art. Tonight, we walk its architecture, not just with our feet, but with our imagination. The Roman buildings were more than bricks. They were statements, triumphal. Arches told stories in stone. Temples rose with exact geometry, pleasing both gods and engineers. Columns soared skyward, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, each a language of design. Romans borrowed from Greece and then went bigger. They added concrete. They invented domes. They made the impossible stand. Aqueducts and baths. Rome brought water to the people from distant mountains. Aqueducts stretched across valleys, perfectly angled over miles. This gave birth to public fountains, lavish baths. Thermi private homes with indoor plumbing. Bathhouses weren't just for washing, okay? They were community centers with libraries, gyms, gardens, and even theaters. Art for the people. Roman art wasn't only for temples or kings. It was everywhere. Mosaics told stories underfoot. Murals brightened homes. Sculptures honored gods, loved ones, even pets. In portraits, in paint or stone, captured human faces with remarkable realism. Colosseum, Pantheon, and beyond. The Colosseum arena of 50,000 spectators echoed with cheers and silence. Beneath its floor ran tunnels, cages, and pulleys, a masterpiece of engineering and emotion. The Pantheon, a perfect circle of stone with a dome still unmatched. Its oculus circular opening at the top. Let heaven touch earth. Both buildings stand today, not just as ruins, but reminders that beauty lasts. Roads, bridges, and beyond all roads lead to Rome, 'cause Rome built them, paved with stone, lined with milestones. Roman roads connected the empire, allowing armies, letters, and ideas to flow like blood through its veins. Their bridges still stand, their sewers still drain, their design still inspires. Now, rest among marble giants as you close your eyes. Imagine the hush of water flowing through ancient aqueducts, soft echo inside the dome of the Pantheon, the warm stones beneath your sandals in a sunlit Roman Forum. Rome's buildings weren't made just to last. They were made to whisper across time, and tonight, they whispered to you. They whispered to you. Rome shaped not just with swords, but with ideas. Its legacy didn't only live in monuments. It lived in thought, law, and language, and those still live in us, in every law book, every courtroom, every conversation. The Roman mind Rome was practical. Its philosophers weren't just dreamers, they were doers. They asked, how do we live with honor? What is duty? What makes a good citizen? One name echoes loudest: Cicero, lawyer, senator, philosopher. He believed in natural law, that certain truths belong to all people, at all times. Truth, justice, freedom. He once wrote, the welfare of the people is the highest law. The law of the land. Rome didn't invent law, but it organized it like no one ever had. The 12 tables carved into bronze in the Forum were the foundation, clear, public, fair for the time. They gave rights, rules, and protections. Later came the great collections, Lex Julia laws under Augustus, the edicts of the praetorian judges, and finally, Justinian's Code, a timeless collection that still shapes legal systems today. Marriage, property, trials, punishments. It was all written, preserved, and passed. On the power of Latin. Latin was more than a language. It was the voice of Rome. From scrolls to speeches, from prayers to love letters, it carried Rome's thoughts across centuries. Even after Rome's fall, Latin lived on, in the church, in medicine, in law, in science, in languages like Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian even. English, though Germanic, carries thousands of Latin words: justice, honor, empire, memory, spirit. You speak Rome every day. Philosophy of action where Greek thinkers dreamed of forms. Romans focused on how to live. Philosophies like Stoicism became a Roman virtue. Control your emotions. Endure hardship. Live with integrity. Seneca wrote letters to help people through grief. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor, kept a private journal full of wisdom we still read today. Sleep now with thoughtful Rome beside you tonight as you rest. Hear the rustle of scrolls in a marble library. Smell the ink on parchment. Feel the weight of quiet wisdom shared from teacher to student. Rome's body has passed, but its mind remains sharp. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest empire is one built of words. Built of words. Rome fell, really vanished. It melted into the world, in laws, in languages, in buildings. It's governments that mirror Rome. Look at a modern parliament or a U.S. courthouse. Marble steps, Latin words, senators, republics, checks and balances. The founding fathers of the United States studied Roman history deeply. Washington was compared to Cincinnatus, the Roman farmer who became a leader, then returned to his field. Even the very word republic, res publica, comes from Rome. It means the public thing, the idea that government should serve the people, not the other way around. The map Rome drew. Many of the world's roads follow ancient Roman paths. Cities like London, Londinium, Paris, Lutetia, Cologne, Colonia were once Roman outposts. Even months come from Rome. July equals Julius Caesar, August equals Augustus, January equals Janus. God of doors and beginnings. Your calendar is Roman. Your alphabet is Latin. Even time wears a Roman face. Roman law and justice. Walk into a courtroom and you'll see judges wearing robes. Legal terms like habeas corpus, subpoena, verdict. These are echoes of Roman law, still guiding how we resolve conflict in many countries. Legal codes traced directly to Justinian's code, crafted in Constantinople 1,500 years ago. Architecture and engineering Rome's love of arches, domes, and concrete-shaped city skylines from Washington, D.C. to St. Petersburg. Even sports. Stadiums today owe their design to the Colosseum. Aqueducts inspired plumbing. Urban planning copied Roman grids. Rome didn't just design for beauty, it designed for function, okay? And we still follow its blueprint. Philosophy, ethics, and identity. Rome's Stoic lessons live in self-help books. Its virtues, duty, honor, resilience, shape schools, soldiers, and leaders. The Roman idea that identity isn't just birth, but citizenship and contribution, which changed the world forever. Even the idea that people deserve rights. Leaders should be held accountable. That education matters. It all echoes from Rome. Now sleep, surrounded by Rome's whispers as you drift off. Know this, the empire is gone, but its shadow lies under your feet. Its voice lives in your language. Soul burns in every candle lit for truth, justice, and beauty. Rome is not the past. Rome is the foundation beneath your present. So sleep now, not in the ruins of an empire, okay? But in the warmth of what still remains. What still remains.